So today I thought I would talk a bit about God's incredible creation. Today I would talk about some specific examples from some of them from the universe, some of them from life, and some of just from humanity at the end. Okay. So we'll start off in Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. This is just the beginning. Now here we have the 7 days of creation. So for the reason the word days is in quotes is because the Hebrew word that is translated as days here, it just means a period of time. It doesn't have an exact amount of time, so it's just in quotes because we don't know for sure how long it was. So here we have creation, we have day 1. So the earth had no form and it was void or empty. So there's nothing there. This is in Genesis 1:2. So now we can turn to maybe Genesis 1:3. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And so now we have day 2, which is vapor above and water below, meaning the atmosphere and the ocean. So verse 6, and God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. So now we have creation, day 3, which is land, sea, and plant life are created. So verse 9, and God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and morning were the third day. And so now we have day 4, which is the sun, moon, and stars are created. So creation of the universe, essentially. Verse 14, and God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night. Let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the 4th day. So now we have day 5, sea and sky animal life is created. So we have verse 20. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly upon the earth in the open firmament of heaven." And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters bring forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth." And the evening and the morning were the 5th day. So now we have day 6, part 1, which is land animals are created. So verse 24, and God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind." And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And so now we have day 6, part 2, which is man created and given dominion. Now Genesis 1:26, and God said, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat, and to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I've given every green herb for meat. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and morning were the sixth day. And now we have God's seventh day, which is the Sabbath. Genesis 2, verse 2. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. So he rested in the Sabbath, he blessed it, and he sanctified it. And this pattern, it repeats itself throughout the Bible, and we see it continually, even right up to the time of Jesus Christ, until when the Holy Spirit is poured out, because when we receive the Spirit, we enter the rest, and we are blessed and sanctified through it. Okay, so enough chapters in Genesis. Now we're moving on to a few points from God's incredible creation. So now we have the universe. We're going to start off with a few examples. So Isaiah 48:15. Mine hand also hath laid the foundation of the earth, and my right hand hath spanned the heavens. When I call unto them, they stand up together. So this is Isaiah 48:15. So the solar system, everything just right. So the solar system, and specifically Earth, everything in it is all just right for life to exist on Earth. And there are millions of variables that all have to be aligned just right for life to exist. And these range from the Earth's axis to the distance from the sun to the type of star we orbit, among others, and we'll get to all of them. So first of all, Earth has to be the right distance from the sun. So the Earth is just the right distance, and if the Earth were any closer, the planet would be too hot for life to exist. We'd all be burned up. And if the Earth were further away, the planet would be too cold for life to exist, and we'd all freeze. And the water cycle also wouldn't work. So here we have a diagram of the water cycle. So the water cycle relies on the evaporation and condensation of water in its three forms, which are solid, liquid, and gas. And if we were either too close to the sun or too far away from it, water would be always either frozen or it would be water vapor, and the water cycle wouldn't work and life wouldn't be possible. So the Earth's rotation period, or rotation speed, is also important, because if the Earth rotated too fast, then the wind conditions would be too severe for life, and it'd be basically like having a giant hurricane going on all the time. If the Earth rotated too slow, then the daily temperature differences would be too great for us to be comfortable, or even for life to be possible at all, because we'd be burning up in the morning and being melted, and we'd be freezing again what was left of us at night. And so the Earth's axis is also important. The Earth has an axis tilt of exactly 23.5 degrees. So if this tilt was any different, even by a single degree, we wouldn't have any seasons. In addition, the temperatures on Earth would be too extreme for us, and it just wouldn't work. So the moon also plays an essential role for Earth. The moon not only stabilizes the Earth's axis, which as we mentioned is very important, but it also affects ocean tides. So these tides, they cleanse coastal waters and they replenish the nutrients in the ocean and make life possible in the shallows. And in addition to this, if the moon were much bigger, or by implication much closer to Earth, the tidal effects on the oceans and the atmosphere and on the rotational period, they'd be too great and life wouldn't work. And if the moon was too small, or if it was too far away, then there would be climatic instabilities and it also wouldn't work. So the sun is also important. There are many aspects of the sun that are essential for life as we know it. So for example, we only orbit one star, we only orbit one sun, but there are some systems in the universe that have 2 or even 3 or even more suns. These are binary systems. And if the solar system was a binary star system, life wouldn't be possible because conditions would be really erratic and it'd just be a mess, really. So in addition, the color of the sun is also important for photosynthesis. If the sun was too red or too blue, then photosynthesis couldn't happen because red and blue need to be in just the right amounts for photosynthesis to work. And the age of the star is also important. The sun couldn't be too early in its life or too late, as in both cases, life as we know it wouldn't be possible for a variety of reasons. And finally, the mass of the star plays an important role. The sun was too large, the luminosity, or the real brightness, as opposed to what we see from Earth, the luminosity would change too quickly. And if the mass were too small, the range of distances for life would be too narrow. This means that the Earth would be sometimes too close to the sun for life and it'd be sometimes too far away. And there wouldn't also be the right amount of ultraviolet light or blue light for photosynthesis. So now move on to some examples of living creatures. So Proverbs 20 verse 12, the hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord hath made even both of them. So we'll start off with the honeycomb. So I just thought I'd read a quote from the book Seal of God. It just has an interesting quote about the honeybee. So it says, "Take now the honeycomb of the common bee. How does it come about that 1,000 different hives of bees all work to the same accurate scale? So accurately did the bees work that if you were to compare 1,000 hives, there would not be the slightest variation. The most skillful draftsman could not reproduce this. How then does the bee accomplish this? And who fixed the design and set the scale?" Monarch butterflies, they have a very spectacular migration. Every year, monarch butterflies in southern Canada and the northern US, every year they migrate to Mexico, where they overwinter in mountain forests. And the journey is over 4,000 kilometers long, sometimes as much as 5,000 kilometers. And this is so long that one generation can't make the flight by themselves. They only live so long. So the migration happens over multiple generations. The journey south takes 2 generations and the return north takes 3 generations. So the original butterflies, they don't see the overwintering site in Mexico, nor do they ever see their northern range ever again. So these butterflies are guided completely by instinct. So now we'll look at a few examples of birds, because there's quite a few of them. So birds' nests, let's start out with. Every species of bird has a different type of nest that they build, and that is best suited to each specific species. For example, on the slide here, you can see a picture of a woven nest by a weaver-type bird. And these nests will always be the same across a given species, even when conditions are very different from their native climates. So for example, the sparrow and the starling, there's more than just these 2 birds, but just for illustration's sake, these 2 birds originally come from areas with cold climates, and they build their nests with warm insulating feathers, and they don't have any inclination of changing, but this is even true when living in warm climates. They keep building their nest the exact same way. So in addition, birds are perfect flying machines. So the respiratory system of birds is superior to any other animal, even humans, as its lung can absorb oxygen while inhaling as well as exhaling. Birds also have the richest blood of any living creature. And their bones are specifically designed for flight. They're hollow on the inside. So they're not only incredibly strong, but they're also very lightweight at the same time. And even in the legs of birds, there's more than meets the eye. Birds have an interesting ability to cling to a tree branch during the storm and sleep. This seems impossible at first, because you'd think that the bird would be blown right off the branch, but it's actually the result of a very clever design. Because in each leg, there's a tendon that stretches all the way from the toes, all the way up to the thigh. As the bird lowers its weight onto the branch, the tendon tightens the toe's grip, effectively locking the bird to the branch so it can't be blown off. In the woodpecker, they're designed perfectly for, well, pecking wood, making holes in trees. So their bills are very strong, and not only that, they're longer and sharper than any other bird. Their skulls are made up of sponge-like bone, which is not only very strong, but it's also highly compressible, so it protects the brain from successive impacts of, while hammering into a tree. In addition, their skulls have many other brain safety features, including having a specific brain orientation, and the brain is also smooth and relatively small, so they don't give themselves a bad headache or a concussion from hitting a piece of wood millions of times a second, or thousands of times at least. So migration of birds in general is pretty spectacular, but Arctic terns are perhaps the best example of this, the most incredible. They're some of the longest journeys made by living creatures on the planet. So the Arctic tern travels upwards of 50,000 miles every single year from the far north of Canada, of Greenland. They go from there to Antarctica and back again every single year. So interestingly, these birds, they don't follow a straight course. They take a meandering, wandering path over the oceans to take advantage of prevailing winds. Makes the journey a little bit easier for them. So the average Arctic tern will travel about 1.5 million miles in its 30-year life, which is equivalent to a round trip from Earth to the moon over 3 times. I also thought we'd look at an example in flowers, because flowers have a numeric order to all their components. So just an example of this, the quote-unquote basic number of the daffodil flower is 3, and the basic number of the buttercup is 5. So what this means is that all the elements of each of these flowers, so the petals, the stamens, the sepals, stigma, etc., they'll be in the number. For the daffodil, that would be 3, or a multiple of it, so 6, 9, 12, 15, etc. Or in the case of the stigma, it'd be divided into that number or multiple of it, 3, 6, 9, etc. So in addition, the Fibonacci number sequence, which is a number sequence in which each term is the sum of the previous 2 terms, this sequence shows itself in flowers. So the seeds of a sunflower follow a Fibonacci pattern, which allows them to be dispersed in the most efficient way possible. Just for illustration, the first few numbers of the Fibonacci sequence are 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, etc. So now we have a few examples from mankind. So Psalm 139:14. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. So before we go into this, I just thought I would talk about quote-unquote simple cells. So even the simplest cells in the human body, which is stem cells, have over a dozen complex components, each of these in varying quantities within each cell. So almost every cell also has the ability to replicate itself and to regenerate dead or damaged tissue. So there are billions of cells in each system we will discuss in the coming slides, and each of them is more complicated than even this simple cell on the right. So this is highly simplified compared to even the most simple stem cells, and this already is pretty complicated, just for some example of what we're talking about. So first we can look at eyes, which are quite simply a miracle. So specifically, human eyes are incredibly complicated because the human eye contains over 800,000 nerve fibers, which transmit over 1.5 million messages at the same instant. There's 1.5 million messages going around in your eye at this moment. So the focusing muscles in the eye, they move about 100,000 times a day. Tear ducts produce the correct amount of fluid to clean both eyes in 1/500th of a second. Incredibly efficient. So in addition to this, each eye contains about 137 million total light sensitive cells. So this is rods and cones. 130 million cells of these are for black and white vision, and 7 million are for color vision. So here's a quote from Charles Darwin about the eye. So he says, To suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus for different distances, for emitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree. So Charles Darwin, who is basically the father of the theory of natural selection, says that his own theory is absurd when referencing the eye. Some food for thought, if you ask me. So blood is essential for life. It's another incredible system. So all of these billions of cells in the human body, they need energy and nutrients, and they get this from the bloodstream. So blood's essential to life, though the blood itself is not even the most amazing part of the system. So Leviticus 17:11, I found this interesting scripture about blood. For the life of the flesh is the blood. And I have it, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul. So this is Leviticus 17:11. So blood clotting is perhaps the most spectacular part of blood, and it's a very complicated procedure. In it, there are dozens of chemical reactions that produce a variety of chemicals necessary to heal a rupture in a blood vessel. So if you cut yourself. So for example, the compound fibrin physically seals the rupture, and fibrin is produced by the enzyme thrombin reacting with the protein fibrinogen. So this reaction is one of the dozens of reactions that take place for blood clotting, and they all happen instantaneously, or almost instantaneously. So all of the procedures and chemicals involved in blood clotting, they need to perform their roles at exactly the right time. Because if one of the components was somehow missing or wasn't performing its function, or maybe performed its function too early, then the system wouldn't work and the blood clot wouldn't form. For example, thrombin, if it decided to react with fibrinogen a little bit too late, the blood clot just wouldn't happen. And if the procedure decides it wants to start spontaneously for no reason at all, then a clot forms and blocks a blood vessel instead of sealing a rupture. So thankfully, this doesn't happen very often, but God's designed this so that this all works every time. So the heart is another essential part of the circulatory system along with blood. So with each heartbeat, blood is circulated throughout the entire body. So the air has to be able to pump more blood through certain regions when needed. So for example, through the legs when you're exercising, but also can't neglect other essential parts of the body at the same time, like the brain. So the heart contains elastic arteries which convert the heartbeats into a continuous stream of blood, which then flows throughout the body. So in addition to providing nutrients for the rest of the body, it also has to provide nutrients and oxygen for itself so that it can keep beating and keep supplying these nutrients. The human heart beats about 100,000 times per day and over 2.5 billion times in a lifetime. So the heart beats quite often. It's got a long lifetime. So the circulatory system and all of its parts, they're an essential part of the body. But beyond that, there are several other systems that are just as complicated and just as interesting, including the nervous system and the brain, the muscular and skeletal systems, the respiratory system, which is responsible for breathing, and the immune system, which protects our bodies from pathogens. Each of these systems has to work together flawlessly with all the other parts of the human body for it to function. So I think I'll just maybe conclude here and conclude with an interesting question. Did this happen by chance? And I think I'll leave it there.